In the world of lighting for content creation, there has been an absolute explosion of small and lightweight LED lights in the last few years, but when you look at lights in the sub $50 range, it's kind of a mixed bag in terms of build quality, light output, and battery life. But these lights from SmallRig could be a good value for creators who need something compact and lightweight, that is, if they work well. So let's take a look at the P96 and P108 Pro lights and see if they're a good value or another piece of video gear that I would regret buying. Before we dive in, I want to mention that SmallRig sent me the P96 and P108 Pro lights for the purpose of reviewing them. I was not paid to make this video, and SmallRig has no input on my review. I do have an Amazon affiliate link in the description for you if you're interested in picking up either of these lights and you'd like to support this channel. Okay, let's start off by reviewing the specs of these two lights, the P96 Pro and the P108 Pro, and then we will talk about differences between them and some use cases. Both the P96 and P108 Pro come with a short USB-A to USB-C cable for charging and a quick-release cold shoe mount. They also have one additional quarter 20 mounting point and a permanent diffusion cover, and they don't come with any other light modifiers. The dimensions of the models are the same at 79 by 64 by 25.3 millimeters, but the weight does differ slightly, with the P96 Pro weighing 110 grams and the P108 Pro weighing 120 grams. Both lights include a built-in 1500 mAh battery that charges via USB-C and provides 5 watts of output power and a rated use time of 70 minutes at full brightness. The stated light output is 1150 lux at 0.3 meters. The color temperature range for both lights is 2500 to 6500 Kelvin, and brightness is controlled in 1% increments with the control wheel. Modes for the P96 Pro include CCT and 5 special effects modes, while the P108 Pro includes CCT, RGB, and 12 effects modes. On Amazon, the P96 Pro is priced at $24.99 US, and the P108 Pro is priced at $29.99 US. So the main difference between them is just that the P96 Pro here does not have an RGB mode, and it does not have the third button that the 108 Pro has, which lets you cycle through the modes a little more quickly. To cycle through modes on the 96, you have to hold down that lower button, and then it will actually cycle through the FX and CCT modes. Whereas on the 108, you have this extra button here, which lets you very quickly and easily cycle through the RGB, the special effects, and the CCT modes. And then this button here lets you swap between sides of the screen, so you're controlling color temperature and brightness, or effect mode and brightness, or RGB color and brightness. So you get a little bit easier controls with the 108 Pro. Now, since we're talking about the operation, I also want to point out how you turn these on. You have to slide the power switch and then rotate the wheel until it comes on, then just sliding the power button turns them off. So they do have 2-stage power on, which helps prevent them from being turned on accidentally in a bag. Now let's talk about performance for a moment. Even though these aren't full-size professional studio lights, it's worth pointing out a couple of things. They both have a built-in 1500 mAh battery, as we saw in the specs, and a stated output of 5 watts. They both state a max output of 1150 lux at 0.3 meters or 30 centimeters. So I measured them at 30 centimeters, set to 5600K and 100% brightness with my Sekonic L478 light meter, and I got 1000 lux for both the P96 and P108 at that distance. Now I got 1100 lux when I moved them up to 28 centimeters, so just 2 centimeters closer, and the stated output is pretty close to what I'm getting, probably within margin of error there. That being said, from a more subjective standpoint, I do find them to be fairly bright for the size. You can see the spread of light is pretty wide from such a small light, and unfortunately it's because the diffusion cover wraps around the front edge of the housing. It's actually allowing the light to spill out of that edge, which can be a bad thing if you're trying to only illuminate what's directly in front of it. There are no modifiers included, which you wouldn't expect for the price, of course, but if you're trying to use one, for example, as a rim light, you probably need to use something like some foam core board or something just to prevent it from spilling out the sides, because it could be spilling light onto your background where you don't want it. As far as color accuracy goes, I don't have a spectrometer, so I can't test the accuracy of SmallRig's claims, but they're both stated to have a CRI of 95+ and a TLCI of 98+. For color temperature, the stated range is 2500 to 6500 with a margin of error of plus or minus 200 Kelvin. Now, I also don't have a high accuracy meter for this. My L478 doesn't do color temperature, but I did put my light meter app in front of them because it has a temperature gauge on it. And I'll put my measurements up on the screen here so you can see them all. But again, take that with a grain of salt because it was using the Lux app for iOS, not a professional meter. And lastly, let's talk about battery life. SmallRig states you get about 70 minutes at full power, so I charged them to 100% and set them both up to 100% brightness at 5600K, and I got a little bit less than 70 minutes out of the P96, but I actually got just a little bit more than 70 minutes out of the P108 Pro. All right, now let's talk about some potential use cases for these lights. You can actually use one of these as a key light in a pinch if you need to. I actually have the 108 Pro set to only 9%, and I put an extra silicone diffuser over it to soften it up even more. It actually works fairly well as a key light in a pinch if you need one, because you find that you're in an environment that you don't have quite enough light for your subject. You can also use them as a rim light, as I am here. I have the 108 Pro positioned back here, set to a blue color to give a little bit of a blue color cast to this side of my face and shoulder. But it is pretty close to my background, and I don't want any of that blue light mixing with the other lights that I have in my background, so I just taped a piece of cardboard, a card that was in a package I received, to the side of it to try and prevent that light spill from getting onto my background. Small lights like this also come in handy for lighting small scenes, especially if you do product footage, like product B-roll, where you don't want to just flood the entire shot with tons and tons of light. You want a little bit more small scale light. Then a light like this can also come in handy for shooting that type of footage. You can also use these lights in that sort of typical vlogging setup where you have it mounted right to the top of your camera or your camera cage. But I personally don't love using lights like this in that arrangement or that configuration, because as you can see, the light is directly in front of my face. It's flooding everything with light and kind of giving you that Blair Witch look a little bit, where it's like your face is blasted with light. This is only on 7%, by the way. This is how bright it is when it's this close to your face. Also, if you wear glasses, when the light is directly in front of you, you're gonna get these reflections. While they do certainly work and they don't add a lot of weight to your vlogging setup, this isn't my favorite use case for lights like this. They can also be helpful for photography, for doing close-up or even macro photography when you really need to close down your aperture to get as much of your subject in focus as you need. You need lots of light to compensate for that. And a light like this that's small and lightweight and able to fit into tight spaces can help you out. All right, now let's kind of summarize things with some pros and cons here. As far as pros go, I think the brightness for the size and the price is good. The battery life is also good. It's not amazing or anything, but for this size and weight, about 70 minutes at full brightness is good in my opinion. The build quality is also nice for this price point. We have mostly plastic here, but we have some metal components as well. And I think overall for 30 bucks, it's good build quality, and I've come to expect that from SmallRig. The Pro model has useful RGB, which makes it more flexible. They both have a simple menu and control system, and they both come with flexible mounting options, including the quick release with the cold shoe mount and 2 1/4-20 options, so mounting is definitely easy. And as far as cons go, as I mentioned earlier, the light spreads pretty wide due to this curved edge of the diffuser surface, and without any modifiers, you're left having to kind of MacGyver something to prevent the light from spilling where you don't want it. That's the main thing that I was sort of annoyed with while using these. Another thing I'll mention is you have to use the control wheel to power on the lights. Now, I can appreciate a 2-stage power on process to prevent them from being switched on in a bag, but at the same time, I found it a little annoying that I had to continually spin the wheel to turn them on, because as soon as it comes on, you're immediately turning up the brightness. I like to be able to turn a light on to the exact settings I had when I turned it off, which is difficult because of how you have to power them on. Now, a specific con for the P96 Pro is that it's only $5 cheaper, and it doesn't have the RGB feature. $29 for the Pro model is already very affordable, so I'm honestly not sure if the P96 Pro is entirely necessary as a product. I guess I shouldn't complain about saving $5 if you don't need the RGB, but they do seem a little too close together to warrant a different product that's that close in price, at least in my opinion. So ultimately, I think these are useful lights that are a nice addition to your kit if you're a content creator. They take up very little space, they add very little weight. Something like this definitely is worth carrying. Even if you do things like macro photography, it never hurts to have an extra light on you, especially one with decent battery life and some nice controls. The P108 Pro would be my personal recommendation because you never know when a little bit of additional color is going to come in handy. So having that RGB mode for 29 bucks, I think is worth it. So that'll do it for this video. Let me know what you think of these lights. Let me know if you pick either of them up for yourself and how you are liking them. Don't forget to subscribe to the Semi-Pro Tech & Gear channel, and while you're here, why don't you check out one of these videos? I know you'll enjoy it. Thanks everybody. See you next time.